Hi, everyone. This is just about this Petrograd district, which is an island. It's just the map is just zoomed in, so you don't see the full picture. But St. Petersburg is all about the islands, so hence the name Venice of the North. And for a long time, up until 1903, till the big bridge, which is not on the map, but it's just right to the right from the Peter and Paul Fortress, until that bridge was open, this area was considered relatively distant neighborhood because there was no immediate access from the main, let's say, not the mainland, because the mainland is made up of multiple islands as well, but still it was kind of a little bit uh, kind of this area was left outside alone, considered a rural area mostly for country houses, and that's where people would escape for the summertime. So it felt more like a getaway place. But after the bridge was opened, that was it. And the two main avenues, which you can see basically here on this map, you see Bolshoy Prospect. This is the avenue we are walking today, and you see the Kamенно-Ostrovsky Avenue just intersecting it. Um, from above, you can see it. Kamенно-Ostrovsky Avenue is that Art Nouveau Avenue that I took you to a couple of months, no, actually maybe half a year ago. But the Bolshoy Avenue is the second biggest because Bolshoy actually means big. Yeah, so it is the big avenue. And in fact, this avenue started to develop a little earlier than the Kamенно-Ostrovsky. So this is I would say we are somewhat halfway through the avenue, and we are approaching the Kamенно-Ostrovsky. That's where we are. So this tour is not about the opulence of St. Petersburg, but it's about a little bit of this vibe of a getaway place, kind of. It still has it. And also, it's the place where, well, I happen to be living in St. Petersburg. We kind of live between the country house and also the Petrogradsky district. It's about the places that are dear to me. And also because this area started to develop in the 1900s, it has a lot of Art Nouveau and eclectic buildings as well. And also some buildings that look very different from what we expect to see in St. Petersburg. Well, so this is where we stopped last time. This building of the three floors was the main office and the flagship store of the shoe factory Skorohod. I shared the story, very personal story of me and my tourist before in the previous episode, and that episode is available on YouTube. And this building looks very much like that from the Stalin period. And for a long time, I myself used to think that it was just another Stalin building. Well, just because of this like monumentalism and well, the very reserved decoration of the facade and very expensive as well. It's not a plaster; it's actually a lot of stone in the decoration. Well, but no, this house belonged to Franz Utemann, who was well, he was of a German descent. His family came in the 18th century together with Peter the Great, or around the times of Peter the Great. As you know, Peter, who established the city, hired a lot of Europeans, and exactly that neighborhood had, well, you may remember, I will just quickly go back to one map. I'm sorry, but if you can see, around 1 o'clock, there is a botanical garden. It's on another island. So here on this map, you can see the entire territory of the Petrogradsky Island, and you can see that there is another body of water that separates it from the botanical garden. So in the area of the botanical garden used to live a lot of Germans because they were mostly involved in the production of medicine. In the botanical garden of Peter the Great, there was there was a big collection of medicinal plants, and this is why I would say that pharmacies were mainly mainly belonged to German families up until the turn of the 20th century. So Franz Utermann was one of the descendants of those Germans that came in the 1700s. Again, maybe after Peter, but clearly the 18th century, really long time ago. And he was a merchant. He wasn't involved in the in the pharmaceutical industry, but he was a very successful merchant who invested a lot in obviously real estate, and he was also an avid art collector. He was mainly involved. His biggest, let's say, business was partnership in, well, he was one of the major shareholders of the joint venture, American-Russian joint venture. I'm not joking. Before the revolution, there was opened this big industrial facility called Red Triangle, where they produced rubber shoes. It's Russian-American rubber manufacture. And in this picture, you can see how big the facility was. So they produced rubber overshoes for everyone, which was, it's called galoche. Well, it's a French word, galoche. It's basically the rubber overshoe you put on your shoes, which was a savior because there still were not that many asphalt roads. This obviously was sent to the rural areas, to the provinces of Russia, where people didn't have, there were still cities that didn't have paved streets. And the paved streets would mainly be still in the central areas. It was impossible to pave every village road. So this was his biggest cash cow, the biggest, for sure. And you can see all these, coat of arms of the Russian Empire. So they were official suppliers everywhere. And this was just the house he invested in. It was just a tenant building. He didn't live there. He lived in a lovely house in the Vasily Island. And he commissioned to the architect of Polish descent, Dmitry Kryzhanovsky, this house. And Kryzhanovsky was more, well, he liked Art Nouveau, but also he liked neoclassicism, and he liked the reserved northern Art Nouveau. So with the dark stone decoration in the facade, like local materials. And well, this is kind of the quintessence of everything that Kryzhanovsky loved. And well, that's what the building is. It was constructed in the in the early 1900s. I don't remember the exact year now, actually. So the first two floors would be for the for businesses, and the rest just residential parts, apartments that would be rented. On the ground floor, there was a pharmacy, very, very big pharmacy. Actually, it says here Parisian something, so a Parisian pharmacy, maybe. Really hard to say. So, but yeah, so there was a big pharmacy. The two floors were occupied by just one pharmacy. And this house has, surprisingly, whenever I can, I show you photographs. Well, we cannot access each and every lobby, but I found these photographs. This house, I bet you never expected that. Neither did I. But that's the lobby of this house that looks so reserved and solemn and strict. And then you see this lobby, which is clearly not the original palette. Definitely not. But I think it's just probably the initiative of people who live in this building. It's not my photos. I've never been inside. It's just what I saw and absolutely have to show you. And it may have been changed already because these photos are from 2010s. And it's possible that I hope they did change the color. But this house also has this metal plaque. This is the sign of remembrance of people who perished during the period of Stalin repressions. It actually, there are a lot of buildings in St. Petersburg and Moscow and across the country that have such metal plaques. However, because of the current situation, there is also the initiative to not sometimes they actually take off these plaques, or they just do not allow placing placing the new ones. I have no idea what it has to do. Like, it definitely doesn't have to do, it doesn't have anything to do with the current war, but it is happening. And this is very sad. But this house still has it. It says that in this house lived Anna Brugyak, a housewife. She was born in 1861, and she was exiled on March 26, 1935. She died in exile in 1937 and rehabilitated in 1963. 1960s, these are the years when, well, after Stalin's death, well, shortly after that, um, the rehabilitation of the people who perished in gulags, in labor camps, and also executed unlawfully, they were all rehabilitated post-mortem, which, well, still made a difference, but not that much, right? So the Brugyak family, I thought it would be a good idea to just, remember these people. So the Brugyak family, the Brugyaks all came from Estonia. And, let's put it like this. What we see here, you see also the names, the birth years. Anna Brugyak is the woman that is holding an infant. So the oldest woman in the photograph, she's here with her husband and their 8 children. They are all based in Saint Petersburg. So Anna Brugyak came from a noble Estonian family. Her name was Anna Rosa Wilhelmina Tavastierna. I hope I pronounced it right. If Maria is here, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so she came from a very old aristocratic Finnish aristocratic family. Estonian family. But they had connections with Denmark. They had connections with with Finland, and it was a very big dynasty, very big family, and very influential. So she married Alexander Brugyak, who also had connections, who also had a lot of connections with Eastern Europe. So, but they married in Saint Petersburg. So she was basically, they all were basically local Saint Petersburgers, and both coming from noble families. Alexander was a military man, like many back then, and he served in many wars. After the Crimean War, he was sent together with Anna to Siberia, but not to exile, but he was sent to serve near the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And he lived for about a decade in Omsk, which is very close to my hometown, which was also, Novosibirsk, which was also, the town also was developed along the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And it's highly likely that he visited my town because he was among those people inspecting the construction of the railroad and thus serving in that area. This is Anna Brugyak already with her grown-up daughters. Then they returned to St. Petersburg, and they stayed in St. Petersburg until the First World War started, and Alexander went to the First World War and died at the First World War. The family remained in St. Petersburg. The eldest son, Georgy, is here with his wife Sophia in 1931. Little did they know back then that in 1930s, eventually the family, when the Great Purge started, and Stalin's campaign to eliminate public enemies and any possible threats whatsoever, the Brugyak family was exiled. So in 1936, they were all exiled to Siberia. However, Georgy, I will show you his photograph again. I believe he is the one standing right behind Alexander, right behind his father. So yeah, that's him. Because Georgy was well, the family was exiled because they had connections with Eastern Europe, and because Alexander, that had been long gone by then, spent a lot of time in Europe and had family connections across Eastern Europe. They were seen as unreliable and possible spies. Well, it was plausible, of course, but so all of them, including Anna, who was a housewife, they were all exiled, and Anna died in Siberia. Georgy was a good cartographer and an engineer, so he was, well, it's impossible to apply word taken care of in the labor camp, but he was seen as I would say an important asset in a way. And compared to other inmates, he at least had slightly better situation. And eventually he left labor camp, but he continued working in Siberia as an engineer, as the construction of one of the hydroelectric power stations. That's the story. So Anna Brujak, as an elderly woman, died in the middle of nowhere. That's the story. So, and they were only all rehabilitated in the 60s. Imagine that. So that's the story of this house. And I like the facade. I like the way it looks. Yes, it does look reserved, a little too dark, but also it was very practical on Krzyżanowski. The gray facade doesn't look too dirty. It doesn't look like it really, really needs a good cleaning because it's gray. Yes, it kind of adds grayness to the city itself, but it's very practical, very. And the house just next to it looks quite similar. I don't know why the cafe was allowed to just paint yellow, or maybe, yeah. So you see, it's been like this for a long time, for several decades at least. This is the photo from early 2000s. So this is the house. I think it looks ugly, this yellow patch. Originally, this house looked like this. The house belonged to Isenbeck family. However, when this land was purchased, it was decided to rebuild the house, and we see the design now. So this is what the house looked like, and then it was rebuilt. So, well, okay. This house still has interesting details, but, well, also, this is not the Stalin period. This is the same period, early 1900s. And it's also a tenant building, just this. And every building on the Bolshoy Avenue is just a tenant house. It's just apartments, and all of them were turned into communal apartments after the revolution. And now they are all, well, and now there are still quite a lot of communal apartments, by the way. The interesting detail of this house, and I have been there, I think I've been there a couple of times. Some of Misha's friends lives in this house, and there's an interesting detail. And I asked my videographer to try to get into the house to film it. If you remember, you may remember from my tours that usually, and even today, 3 hours ago, we did a lovely walk in Tbilisi, and I took you to a big lobby, which we haven't seen before, right? And yeah, we never seen it. We never saw it. So we entered through the let's say, it's not exactly the servants' entrance, but in these tenant buildings there would always be several classes of apartments, like the first class, a premium class, second class, and also the area where the servants lived, with a servant staircase, like a service staircase. Here we are now at the kind of master staircase, and there is no wall. The separation is transparent, but from here you can see the servant staircase. It's a lot less ornate. As you can see here, you have nice fancier tiles. You have some ironwork, but there is super basic and, well, super basic ironwork. Just that. That's quite unusual. I don't know any other house like that. I don't know why it was done. Maybe it was just cheaper. Maybe they wanted to add more light to their. Oh, I know why they could have done that. They built this very big window that just goes through all the floors. So just maybe, or maybe it just separated, every two floors there is separation. I don't really know that. I never really paid attention to it. But maybe they just wanted to add more daylight to the main staircase, master staircase. Maybe. Another building that looks very Soviet, but it's not, was the apartment building that belonged to the Department of Empress Maria Institutions. Empress Maria Institutions was a big charitable organization that was, Maria Fedorovna, the mother to Nicholas II, wife to Emperor Alexander III, she was in charge of it. Empresses consort were always in charge of different charity activities and social projects. That's just how it has to be done. Still the same way. And she and her committee, her department, was in charge of multiple activities. And this is how one of the sources of financing for the department worked. People paid for the rent, and this is how the committee of the department earned funds to provide charity work, to provide any kind of care to the facilities that were under this department. One more look at the Bolshoy Avenue. Very few cars. This is interesting. I don't really know what. I can't really figure out what time of day it was. It must have been the weekend, but it's really hard to say. So Alexander Nikolsky, who was this gentleman? Well, Alexander Nikolsky owned the house that we are going to see. Just a merchant who owned another tenant house. I found this artwork on one of the databases about houses in Saint Petersburg, and that's exactly how I remember it. You can see a lot of water. You can still see a little bit of the snow that's just melting. I think it's the snow, just a little bit of it. I'm not sure, but it looks like snow to me because you can see also this white snow a little bit on the roofs, a little bit on the windows. So I guess it's just this early spring, a lot of water in the streets and melting snow, and some early spring sun. That's exactly how I remember it. That's true. So this is the Nikolsky house at the corner. There you go. It just belonged to Alexander Nikolsky, a merchant. You can see there right after the house that belonged to the department of Empress Maria Fedorovna. This is the house. I am pretty sure that most people that live in this house don't even refer to this house this way. Nikolsky. I live in Nikolsky house. I don't think so. There are houses that I would say have very distinct name. Let's say Muruzi house, where the apartment of Joseph Brodsky, the Russian poet, Russian-American poet, a dissident. Several other houses whose name would definitely mean something. But this is not that's not the case. And then the house was purchased by a merchant, Alashinsky, and it was significantly rebuilt. There you go. So Alushinsky, I'm not sure what he was into, but and I'm not sure what kind of industry he was into, but the house was beautiful, quite expensive, and well, the architect who was in charge of the project was very creative because he used really different ways of decoration, the ways to, let's say, the modes in the application of plaster and interesting details in the decor. Well, you can see this house also from the old photographs. That tower really stands out over there, if you can see. And the architect was Dmitry Ustrugov. I don't know. I don't know the previous architect, but I know this one. So Dmitry Ustrugov built quite a lot in the 20 in early 20th century in Petrograd Side, and we know more about his wife even than him because his wife Varvara or Barbara Ostrugova was a famous folk singer and also a fairy storyteller whose performances were always sold out. She was um, sh a lot of kids in Saint Petersburg treated her like their own mom or a grandma or an Auntie Varvara. She was a very popular storyteller, and her stories, her recital of stories and folk songs were even sold on vinyls. Anyway, and this house is also a fairy tale. We know also, by the way, that Varvara or Barbara helped her husband with his projects. I don't know if she had a diploma of an architect, probably not, but it doesn't mean she couldn't really be assisting him or couldn't be the source of inspiration. And she could have been responsible for, some of the decorative elements of the facade. Maybe, just maybe, you will see some of them. I think they are really cute. And also this house looks a little bit like fairy tale to me. Even these big lamps, they are original. Well, maybe the plafonds are not, but these are original. These metal details are original. They look really whimsical to me. I'm not sure even what it is. I think I see a face and maybe a paw, and that's the lobby. Huh? Hmm? This is neo-Gothic style coming in. But again, it's so very eclectic. It's not even Art Nouveau, it's a combination of so many things. And yet, the lobby itself is not that expensive in its decoration. The interesting tiles, I haven't seen tiles of this design anywhere else, but it doesn't mean that I've seen all of them, obviously not. There is no decoration on the walls. Maybe there were, but not that I know of. But the doors, look at the original doors, which completely mimic the design of the house, right? That is lovely. And also the railing, the similar neo-Gothic designs. I can see the resemblance. I can see that. And it's just a plaster work, stucco decoration. And obviously there had to be stoves. So the black stove, I'm not sure if that stove is original or restored or whatever, but I know about another stove in this building, just a different lobby. I found this photograph online again in the big database. So the people were trying, some people were trying to find out where the tiles came from because they are quite, different from what most lobbies had. But this letter M doesn't mean much to anyone. We don't really know what it was, who it belonged to. Nevertheless, I'm a big fan of this building. I think Alushinsky House has its um, vibe, like a fairy tale vibe to me. I also like the way they decorated the bay window. I think it's beautiful, but I also see some faces there. Sorry. Also, you can see the facade. So um, the central facade has the stone in the decoration, but from the side, you see where the blue or gray car is parked, and further down the street, you can see that there is no stone in the facade decoration, but a plaster. This type of plaster application is called shuba, which means a fur coat. It looks like a fur coat. I don't know. This is the term that we use in Russia, but I don't know if this term applies anywhere else. But that's what we say: fur coat, plasterwork, and it's cheaper, of course, because it's not stone; it's just plaster with colors, obviously. And it's so because the apartments with the entrance from the side street and facing the side street are always cheaper. You see, this is how all these tenant buildings, the economy, the pricing of the apartments in these houses worked. Everything mattered. Which floor, where in the house, how many rooms, where windows are looking, everything. Okay, the stove. Well, this is a lovely stove, and this is a newly restored stove. Oh yes, and by the way, if you look at the first picture, again, this is taken from. Sorry, I should pause here for a sec. Uh, yeah, so I'll probably stop here for a sec. This, if you look at the first picture from the left, it says before, but it what is important, look at how long the lobby is. The Alushinsky house has very long lobbies. Well, because you see how far deep into the side street that part of their house I mean, not was, is. So there was a fireplace, a stove, well, a stove, and it was all covered in plaster. Well, the people, well, you know that there is this um, volunteer organization that cleans and restores stained glass. Also, there were volunteers who were willing to clean and restore stoves. I mean, there is still this organization, but they work for free. That's why they're called volunteers. But they they need the tenants of a lobby of the house to buy construction materials, paint, whatever needed, and at some point, uh, people who lived in this house chipped in and they purchased the necessary materials and the work started. So a couple of years later, in 2025, it's written here, the work was finished. They were able to clean the plaster, take the plaster off the surface of the tiles. They were able to restore the tiles. They were able to well, that photo is a little too dark, as you can see the left one. The lower left one is a little too dark because originally the color is like in the video. You see, it was all covered with plaster. So this job was tedious. It was difficult. Just imagine how much work had to be done, and not all the tiles they were able to restore. But anyway, just a few more things to see. Some whimsical elements here. Interesting meander on the of the ironwork, and well, very typical lobby, just yellow walls, and that's it. But there is a little bonus. If if you're curious enough, your curiosity can take you to the upper floor, and then you will be rewarded. Well, and plus the the railing and also the frieze decorations are still there. So the house was really well thought through, really nicely designed, and a lot of original doors still have survived. But that's what I'm talking about. The stained glass is still there. That's the reward. If only, well, one has enough energy and curiosity to go up the, is 5 floors or 4 floors? I think it's 5 floors. And we're living just that. There you go. I don't know if there were any decorations on the walls. That's really hard to say. But here you see the difference in the facade decoration. You see the stone and you see the so-called fur coat facade. The pink house, I call it the chessboard house, but it's only my name. It's not called this way, this pink one. Also recently restored facade. Again, looks very Saint Petersburg to me. This house is even in the postcard of the views of Le Grand perspective. You can even see a little bit of the Alushinsky house in the photo to the right next to the lamppost. Well, nevertheless, you can see a lot of stores. You see the stores, stores, stores. Every window, every door is somebody's store. Businesses were flourishing in the street, obviously. And as you know, for the second half of each of these Bolshoy Avenue tours, I take you to a small, very niche museum because otherwise you will never see them. Well, I hardly ever took any of my tourists to any of these museums, or maybe a couple times. And next time, I haven't scheduled that tour yet, but I will do it shortly. So next time I'm going to take you to a house museum, an apartment museum. I promise you're going to enjoy it. And this person will actually be familiar to you. Oh, by the way, here on the map, you next to the body of water at Bolshoi Prospect is just about to intersect it. There is a place called Pita's. That's an amazing eatery. They had some of the most delicious shawarmas in my life. I actually I'm not really a big fan of shawarmas or donors. It's not really my food. But there, I don't know, it was one of my favorite places. Whenever I was in the area, and whenever, I had money, I would go and, just treat myself to one of those shawarmas. It was very good. Very good. Ooh, I'm drooling. Anyway, so we are now the Bolshoi Avenue. As you can see, it's just intersected. If you go a little down, you see the Kamenostrovsky Avenue and you see the Bolshoi Avenue. So it's just we are approaching the intersection, but we are not there now because I need to take you to the Museum of the History of Photography. In this screenshot of the map, you see my Peter's place, right? You see Bolshoi Avenue, 6 o'clock, Bolshoi Prospect, 6 o'clock. And then if you go straight ahead the same road, you will find yourself at the street of Professor Popov, who was the rival of Marconi. And they too were the inventors of the radio. But Marconi eventually was the first one to register it. So, but we're heading to the Museum of Photography, History of Photography. And I believe that there is, I don't know, specifically Petrograd Side just has this great variety of these niche museums. And I'm taking you to this place. It's a private museum. Many of them are private museums and made up of collections from several collectors. There were a lot of fanatics of, photography in St. Petersburg have always been. And I mean, I am not surprised. So here we have a lot of cameras from as early as the 19th century, second half of the 19th century. We have the predecessors of photography. We have a lot of items that used to be kept and used to be used in photo studios, in the so-called photo ateliers. And we also, as I said, we have predecessors to the photography. This museum actually tells you the history of photography through through the attributes, through the tools that were used ever since photography was invented, and even before the photography we know now was invented. For example, this is camera obscura, which actually means the dark room. And this tool is known from as early as 3rd century BCE. Believe it or not, we know that Leonardo da Vinci used camera obscura a lot. A lot of artists used camera obscura. It wasn't yet about photography, obviously, but it was about how one could work with an image and how one could put the image into on a piece of paper. From what they saw, how they could put it on a piece of paper. It was a very simple instrument. It dealt a lot with the reflection of an object, but I wouldn't have been able to invent anything like this. Again, I just feel always very inferior. So that's okay. It's fine. And there was also one more thing. Um, it's stupid that they do not allow to film with a gimbal, so the video is going to be a little bit floppy, but that's okay. Also, the predecessor to photography was daguerreotype. Daguerreotype, it was probably the very first, most similar, to, to photography, but still, it's 1839. It's still, a long way to go, but you can see there was involved a lot of chemical elements, metal plates, and there was no really a negative. So that's why you couldn't make copies. So it was already a very big progress, a very big step forward, but it still functioned as an image in a way, in a sense that you couldn't copy it and you could only have one version of it, and that's it. So that's what I would say was a bit of a stopper in many ways. But Louis Daguerre did a good job. Um, and that's his own selfie in the daguerreotype. So they will use a lot of chemical elements, and I don't really know the names, but these are the items from the 19th century that were purchased by the collectors. It's not just somebody's one collection; it's several collections put together. There's just another camera obscura. I can't tell you which period it belongs to. Probably not something very old. Maybe they just, this one's probably the older, I would say. This one. Also, I have a lot of photographs from my camera roll and short videos that I also implemented here because, I always did this very short videos because I thought I would be working on them and putting together for YouTube, but I never did. So, but I know how to use it. And these type of, jars and bottles, they actually contain chemical elements. So these are all the items that once, at some point, were used in photography. Crazy. And that's a case in which these items were stored and could be carried because photographers for a long time had to be carrying with them their studio, which was heavy, really, really bulky, but they didn't really have much options. And what actually, that's Oleg actually quite liked the museum. He shared with me that, there is a guide who, in a very interesting way, told a lot of nuances. And I remember when I was there many years ago, we also had a really nice guy who happened to be one of the collectors who just for fun, for kicks, did tours every once in a while. So I was hoping Alec would would have the same guide, but no, there was someone else. And I remember the best thing, the first thing that I remember from the museum is this interesting camera. Well, this is the camera with two lenses. Actually, it's two cameras in one. And that's an interesting thing. We are now going to see the sections of a big panorama of St. Petersburg. So we are starting with the Alexander column and the Palace Square, right? Then here we see the Nevsky Avenue and also the Gorokhovaya Street, and then the Voznesensky Avenue, the third street over there to the right. Now it's the Voznesensky Avenue, which we haven't walked yet, but we are going to, I promise. But Gorokhovaya Street we walked already. So the three streets that's from the Admiralty building. This is the St. Isaac's Cathedral with a golden dome, right? And this is another section of the panorama. You see the Neva River. You see the Annunciation Bridge to the left, right? And then you see the Academy of Science. This is the Palace Bridge, and you can see a little bit of the Winter Palace already. 3 o'clock, and also you see on the other side of the Neva River, you see the spire of the Peter and Paul Cathedral, right? So this is kind of, well, this is the Winter Palace at its best, and that was it. So we've seen a lot of buildings that are still there, but we have seen very few people in the streets. Have you noticed? There's hardly anyone there. Well, there are some people, but very few. It looks like the city was completely deserted, which was not really the case. That's just because that back in the days, up until the end of the 19th century, the cameras, due to a very long exposure, they just could not physically capture moving objects, and people were moving. You couldn't stop the entire city. You couldn't really make the entire city freeze just to take a panoramic photograph or just to take any photograph. Obviously not. So Nikolai Apostoli, who basically was a sailor, and then he had quite a high rank on the fleet. I don't really know much about it. He was an engineer. He was a marine engineer, and he wasn't the first one who invented this who thought about the improving this particular feature, and he came up with this idea separately from everyone else. So he invented this double camera with two lenses, and also he adapted the cameras for taking photographs on the water. I don't know what exactly he did, but he specialized in taking photographs in the water and all the imagery related to the fleet and taken in the open sea. I don't know the details, but I know that that Apostoli did a lot of work. Another interesting thing is the collection of these magic lanterns that they have. Again, it's not really a photography yet. It's more, again, just one of the ways of working with an image. And it basically was a projector, right? And it just projected the light. It's pretty much similar to a projector. And this was seen as a very powerful educational tool and a propaganda tool. And at some point, it started to be used in education, of course, to give lectures, to illustrate something to a big group of people. And yes, it's interesting that this magic lanterns sometimes were called like devil's lanterns because it was scary to many people seeing a big image, much bigger than it actually was, on the small glass plaque. Yeah, that was scary. So I like this interesting illustration from the book of Physics Elementa Mathematica of 1720. Yeah, yeah. So projecting a monster. So it says the depicted lantern is one of the oldest known preserved examples and is in the collection of the Museum Berhav Leiden. In Leiden. Wow. In the Netherlands. Who would have thought? Well, I didn't know until I put everything together. This is just taken from Wikipedia. Of course, I don't. I'm not a specialist in photography, but I enjoy old photographs. Or this one, this engraving of an organ grinder with a magic lantern on her back. So even back then, in the 18th century, this magic lantern was seen as a one of the maybe even mass media tools. Maybe it was. Or there you go. An advertising with a picture of a triple lantern dissolving your apparatus. Triple lantern. That was scary. Prices from £25 to £100. Nice. Okay. So, as I said, photographers had to carry a lot of items with them: the cameras, the tripods, the covers, the flash, the flash, and a lot more. And it was heavy. And imagine if it was raining, and also they sometimes had to develop if it was well when it was glass plates or metal plates, just imagine how fragile it was and heavy. But then later on, obviously, um, with time, obviously, one of the goals was to minimize the weight of the equipment, minimize the number of items necessary for a photographer to take with them. All that matters. And a lot of engineers worked on it. It was essential. A lot of people who were not even photographers became very good photographers because they were physicists or because they knew some basic laws of physics, and they were basically engineers. Well, this box, when I was in the museum about 6 years ago, no, no, not six, 8. I think it was 8 years ago. Yeah, something like that. I first saw this box and I couldn't believe my eyes. I had no idea that the retouch of photography of the photographs, the Photoshop existed way before the Photoshop existed. Of course, I was aware of the retouching of photographs, but I didn't know that one could retouch even, like, small, even the details such as a smile or eyelashes. So there was this box, like a light box in a way, maybe. Um, so you had a negative, and then you had, paint, you had brush strokes and other items that you could work on and add your touches or improvements or hide something, and then it would be printed. So then it would be developed on paper in the retouched way. I had no idea such things existed, though, but that was kind of the almost the portable Photoshop. Another thing is studio photography. This 3D imagery, we may think that this is a thing of the 21st century, which I used to think, before I visited the museum, I don't think I've ever taken any tourists there. No, I don't think so. No. So Charles Wheatstone knew how human eyes worked. That we see that both eyes see one and the same image, but from little different angles. But he just couldn't come up with a tool or with a mechanism that would help us produce this 3D imagery. But he wanted it. And he worked hard. He published a lot of research works, but it was only thanks to Sir David Brewster, it was England, that this stereoscope was invented. So there were two cameras that would be it could be one and the same camera actually. It didn't have to be the double cameras. It could be just one that would take the image of a certain object, but from slightly different angles, as if you're watching with the left eye and as if you're watching with the right eye. And then there was developed this stereoscope uh, through which you could see the same image in 3D. Isn't it brilliant? So the studio photography was a thing in the last quarter, even no, in the second half of the 19th century. Yeah, isn't it amazing? So I didn't know that, and then I forgot about it, and then I remembered when I was working on this video. Another, well, box that photographers had to carry with them. They also had to carry with them, well, like everything. Look, the tent with the tape, with the chair, a lot of different bottles and jars, and a lot of other equipment, and the camera itself, which was heavy, and the tripod, and also the retouch box, all of that. That was heavy. That's why there was needed assistance. That's why there was needed. Well, they were waiting. They were waiting. Big improvement, big progress to come into this field. And actually, Kodak company brought this innovation and also made it way more accessible to, I would say, less privileged groups of society. Well, first and foremost, Kodak aimed at taking this responsibility and the load of developing photography, photographs, processing photographs, take it off the shoulders of photographers. And also, they wanted to create much lighter and smaller cameras, which eventually they did. Well, you've seen how way bigger the cameras were. Every new Kodak camera would be more compact than the previous one. And this made Kodak very popular. And as you know, every member of Nicholas II family had their own Kodaks. These are these are not the Kodaks that belong to the Romanovs, but these are the identical Kodaks that belong to the Romanovs. Even Tsarevich Alexei had his own Kodak camera, hence the photograph of the royal family. And basically, first Kodak's cameras, you still had to work with metal plates. You still had to do a lot on your own. You still had this not metal, but glass plate. Sorry, glass plate. I don't know the nuances. Please forgive me. I'm so ignorant about, the chemistry and the physics of it. So, but at least it was way smaller and it was way more compact. Everything could fit into one box. This made things a lot more accessible to people. A lot more people were open to this. But they were still aiming to make photography even easier, like amateur photographers. So, and then later on, like starting from early 1900s, it was already possible just not to develop a photograph on your own. You just take a photograph and there is a film inside. So that was film, not glass plates. And then, they only had to do something with the film. So how did, and because, well, imagine carrying all these glass plates. Imagine that. That was heavy, impractical, dangerous, expensive, and you name it. I know I'm overrunning, but I need maybe just another 5 minutes, and this would be it. Sorry for that. I got a bit carried away, I know. So George Eastman eventually came up with this film for cameras, and this film would be processed and the photographs would be developed in the studios, in the same studios where the cameras were first purchased from. And then a client would come to pick their printed photographs and their cameras that were already loaded with the film that could make up to 100 images. The Kodak girl. Take a Kodak with you. Yeah, exactly. But it was still quite expensive. But Eastman wanted everyone in the world to be able to afford a camera. And this is how this Brownie camera was invented by Eastman Kodak family company. And it was just as small, well, almost as small as 2 or 3 matchboxes. Just that. And it cost $1. This is probably the smallest camera ever. And they have this camera on display. I remember seeing it. It's tiny. It's like this. It's tiny, literally. They think there was purchased more than 1 million of brownies. So no wonder you can still come across a lot of them. You can still come across a lot of them on eBay, by the way. A lot of them. So here we have a lot of European and Russian cameras, especially the Leicas. Well, because Leicas became very popular for quick photography, for reporters, for journalism, because journalists had to take pictures quickly. They needed to process them quickly and print them and then, to submit them. So Leicas were perfect. This is, by the way, the very first photograph taken with a Leica camera. And in the Soviet Union, they also came up with a camera of the so-called reporter type. We used to call it just a reporter camera. So that was made. It was similar, but not identical to the construction of Leica, but it was invented approximately, the same time. But it wasn't a copy. Well, and the museum just has gazillions of other cameras, gazillions of tools, machines, and devices for photography, for printing, for retouching, and also they have a lot of like unusual cameras. For example, the camera to the left, it was for very accurate focus, and it was made to measure. I don't know why. I have no idea what's going on here. This camera was used for spies because it was just, you put it on yourself and then you just hide it under your clothes and you put the camera itself, the lens, and it looks like a button. So it can be disguised as a button. It's a spy camera. And the museum has several versions of spy cameras. And look at all that. This is just maybe 30% of the cameras they have. And this is the gigantic 500,000 kilogram in weight. It's like half a ton. Sorry, I don't know how much this is in pounds. I'm so sorry, but this is really, really, really heavy. 500 kilograms. I don't know how much pounds this is, but I can look it up. Okay, 500 kilograms in pounds. 500,000. So half a ton kilograms. So it's 500 kilograms, not 500,000, 500 kilograms. Sorry, where was I saying? What am I saying? So 500 kilograms is it's like 1,100 pounds. Does it make any sense? Okay, well, you let me know on the chat. I'm about to turn the chat to turn the chat back on. And also one of the smallest Soviet cameras was also like of this size, almost the same as Brownie, maybe just slightly bigger. You can see it. They also have it on display. I don't remember seeing it, but I found it on the website of the museum. So this is basically it. Again, sorry for overrunning, but I thought this museum absolutely has to be seen, and nobody else would have taken you there anyway. So I think it's my mission now to take you to all these small niche museums, which are lovely and have really importance. So that's just how I see it. Let me turn the chat back on. So I used footage from Oleg. I used my own photographs. I used photographs from the website of the museum, from the internet. So from everywhere I could. Okay, the chat is back on. And also, what I totally forgot to share with you, but I'm going to do it now. And hi to all those who joined us a little after we started. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to say hi. Let me share with you the links. Okay, half a ton. Okay, is 1,000 pounds. Yeah, so thank you so much. It makes sense, right? It makes sense. Okay. Oh, yeah, good. So I have just shared with you the links. So if you missed me from about like 3 hours ago, we had a lovely walk in Tbilisi. We visited a gorgeous lobby, actually two in one. And we saw newly restored buildings. We visited the newly restored courtyard. We've seen some buildings in a worse condition. And we finished in a beautiful gift store that just belongs to one family of artists that create absolutely unique stuff. And yeah, so you absolutely need to check it out. The link is there on the chat, as well as the link to my next tour in 45-ish minutes from now. That's the Grand Choral Synagogue of Saint Petersburg. And that tour is going to be slightly different from what I did about 2 years ago. I've added some more footage, some more photographs, and some more stories because I hate doing the same thing again and again. And for tomorrow, 4 tours. You can't miss Ice Cream Festival in Tbilisi live stream. Just can't miss that. Yeah, Grisha might join me, might not. It depends on his plans because he's on vacation. Well, but then after I'm taking you on a pre-recorded tour of the Enchanted Garden in Georgia. If you were with me on my Lavender Field Festival, Lavender Farm tour, not festival tour, then you know that in the end, as a bonus, I took you to a garden, and it was a very quick walk through the garden just to wrap it all up. But I am going to take you on a fully fledged tour of the ancient capital of Georgia called Mtskheta. We're going to walk some old streets, and then I'm taking you to this garden and also museum of Mikhail Mamulashvili, who was a landscape artist, who was the florist, who was a unique man who took care of a lot of gardens in Tbilisi, but also created his own paradise. And his family, his descendants, his great granddaughter, and the entire like clan of Mamulashvili has restored the house where Mamulashvili grew up and lived, and he lived for almost a century, by the way. And then they have preserved his furniture, all his archives with the letters he exchanged with ambassadors of European countries, with movie stars, with politicians. And it's just incredible. Whenever anyone visited Tbilisi and Georgia, everyone would be taken to that garden. It's Art Nouveau furniture, 19th century herbarium collection. You absolutely have to see it. You have to see it. Nobody else would ever take you there, I promise. And unless you come, and then I'll take you there too. But, physically. And then Misha, and Grisha are going to talk about the Soviet children's literature with movies, of course. And Grisha is going to share with you one of his favorite books from the Soviet times and why he likes it. And then he's going to show you an episode from a cartoon. And he's going to share with you something else, and also his robotics class. And he did so much soldering today when I picked him up. And then he'll share with you his activities in the day camp that he's attending. So a lot of things that he's now planning to, because he wants to earn some more pocket money. So whenever I can provide him with some more pocket money, I always do. So it's up to you now. And then I'm taking you to the unique example of Middle Eastern Art Nouveau, house of the big, Hebrew poet, and also the poet of Israel, but first Hebrew poet, Chaim Bialik, who originally was born in the Russian Empire on the territory of modern-day Ukraine, where a lot of Russian Jews were born. Ukraine, of course. Russian Jews, I mean, because they came from the Russian Empire. That's what the country was called back then. And Chaim Bialik wrote in Hebrew, and eventually when he came to the Holy Land, he died in the 30s. So he didn't see the establishing of the state of Israel. So we can't really say he is the poet of Israel. Well, but he is, of course. He is one of the biggest poets of Israel, but he was also one of the people who contributed to the creation of Hebrew. Well, not the creation of Hebrew, but the use of Hebrew as the language, not just of a holy scripture, and not only as just, the everyday life, but also the language of a poetry and fiction. So interesting. And the house is gorgeous. Middle Eastern Art Nouveau. I don't really get to show you much of it because there's not really that much of it. So, but there is, and more than just one, but the Beit Bialik we absolutely have to see. Thank you, Sharon. I'm glad that you've enjoyed this niche museum. Kodak began in my city, Rochester. Ronnie, good for you. Thank you, Dorley. Thank you so much. Oh, I love this museum, Marilyn says. I taught photography for 20 years. Oh my goodness, I must have made so many mistakes, or at least, inaccuracies. We made pinhole cameras each year. The pinhole is called, wow, okay, makes sense. Thank you for bringing me here today. Oh, thank you so much for joining me. So Dolly is saying my youngest son is a professional photographer, so I found it extremely interesting. Incredible, Dorley. Wow. I didn't know that. I think you never told me that. Wow. So Marlon's saying I have a nephew whom I gave his first camera at 4 years old. He's also a pro photographer. I'm not surprised. They say it's more important to click the people than to click on the cameras. That's true what people say. Dolly's son spent lots of money on photography equipment, and now he's studying nursing. Oh, that's the same one, because I thought that, isn't he a nurse now? Oh, okay. So it's like more into MRI than photos, but it's okay. It's kind of still similar. Maybe that's why he's in the nursing. Yeah. Sorry, I don't. I'm just joking, of course. Wow. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I'm sharing here the links in case you would like to support me. You can do it either by buying me a coffee or sending me a PayPal donation. And thank you those who have already supported me. I will see you in 40 minutes with a virtual tours. Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. It's been so much fun. And now it's time to take a shower because I literally came a minute before the tour started because we were stuck. We didn't have traffic. Well, there was a big traffic jam. The road was closed when we were in the downtown. So we took a metro, which is okay. We were on time, but wow, Dolly, this is amazing what your son. I know how much, well, I know just a little bit of what your son has done, and this is just incredible. Wow. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been so much fun. I've enjoyed taking you to this photography museum, and it's so sad. I never got to take any tourists, any of my guests to that museum. I did make sure I took, well, many of my guests if they wanted. It's not like I would drag them. I didn't drag anyone to any museum, but well, I just never had a chance with a photography museum for some reason. Thank you so much. I will see you shortly. Bye bye. Oh, Sharon, thank you so much for the copies. I just see them. Thank you. And do let me know about the bells. We'll figure it out. And by the way, everyone who wants, well, if you haven't seen that walk in Tbilisi that I did a few hours ago, you may revisit it now. The link is in the chat, and you can always find it on my YouTube channel and through my website. So we visited in the end like 55 minutes, or, well, like or so since the tour started. In the end, basically, um, we visited a beautiful gift store. And if you want to purchase any of the items, I actually thought that I could help you with that. Obviously, you will have to cover the shipping, but we could do that if it's something that you're interested. I absolutely want to make sure Piece of Georgia reaches every corner of the world. So do let me know. We can arrange that. And I'm not interested financially. I just want to support this little store that is ran by one family of artists where a father and a mother and two daughters create these absolutely unique works of art. And we've seen, not just me, but we together have seen so many beautiful gift stores. And in none of them, we have seen any of these items. This is unique. So that's just it. Thank you and bye bye.